Okay, Barada, good morning everyone, and welcome to today's session on studying in Asia. Today we're going to give you some information about the International Exchange Programme at Cardiff University and why you might want to choose to study in Asia. Just before we start, I have some housekeeping notes. All attendees will be automatically muted throughout the webinar. There will be an opportunity for you to ask live questions through the Q&A box. But any questions that we don't have the opportunity to answer at the end of the session, we will follow up via email. Just to let you know as well, this session will be recorded and will be accessible later on. Just to let you know as well, a lot of the pictures that I've used in this presentation are from students who studied abroad in Asia, just so you can get a real flavour of experiences that students had. So, before we start the main part of the presentation, I just wanted to introduce myself. So, hello everyone, I'm Jenny and I work within International Exchange in the Global Opportunities team. This means I support incoming and outgoing students before, during and after their exchange. Just a little bit about me. My international experience is a little bit different to the traditional study abroad in that I actually went to live and work in South Korea for 4 years after I finished university. But my experiences of living and working abroad has given me the opportunity to meet all new friends around the world and experience life in a completely different culture. And it's definitely helped to provide me with some invaluable examples for job interviews and applications over the years. I think that's why I'm such a strong advocate for students going abroad and particularly to destinations in Asia. So I hope during this presentation today, I can convince you to give it a go. And just a reminder, if you've got any questions for me, pop them in the Q&A box and I'll answer them at the end. So you might be thinking, why should I go abroad in the first place? I know that you've probably heard these stats and figures in other talks and we've mentioned them this week, but before we get started, I think it's worth emphasising, why you should go abroad in the first place. Recent research has shows that an international experience will improve your employability and will be a great addition to your CV, and that graduate employers are looking for and generally really appreciate a global graduate. Research has also shown that having an international experience may even increase your future salary, which is great news. And often students who have had an international opportunity will receive a higher degree classification, which you can see on this quote here. Going abroad during your time at Cardiff will also help you develop key transferable skills such as teamwork, independence, problem solving, and all those great things. So a little bit about the International Exchange Programme. The International Exchange Programme provides the opportunity to study abroad outside of Europe at one of our partner universities. Undergraduate students are able to study for a semester or a year, depending on your degree programme, and the credits that you gain abroad will contribute towards your degree here at Cardiff. So we're very lucky, we've got partner universities all over the world, so USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Japan, Mexico, Peru, South Korea, Hong Kong. Whew. It depends on your school where you're able to go, and each school has a different range of partners to offer. You can find a full list of these on our intranet pages, but I'll signpost that later. You'll also see there's some information about finances here, but again, I'll touch on that later in the presentation. So now that you know a little bit more about what the International Exchange Programme is, here are some questions that you might be thinking about, and we're going to cover these today, obviously focusing on Asia. So we've got where can I go? How do I choose? How much does it cost? What is the application process? And then we're very lucky we can have a little bit of a chat with our ambassadors later. Okay, so Asia is a huge region geographically, and for us we have 7 countries. So we have Singapore, China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Thailand and Japan. So today I'm not going to go super in-depth about one particular country, but I'm going to look at some common themes and general things you'll need to take into account when studying in Asia. Of course, personally, I'd love to go into depth about each of these countries and the amazing opportunities that we have there, but I don't think that's the best use of time today. But, just let us know if you've got any questions about them. We can always set up an appointment later on down the line. So if you are looking for information about a particular partner, then I'd just like to mention the Global Opportunities Notebook. So it's available at the moment on the Discover Global Opportunities Week landing page. As you can see, we've collated information about our partners, so including any useful links or fact sheets. After this week, we'll still have access to it, so we can let you know where to find that. When we were building this notebook, I tried to ensure that we had information for all of our partners in Asia. However, I would like to point out there might be some additional partners that I don't mention or touch upon today, and particularly these are linked with the School of Biosciences or Medicine. If you are from this school and you'd like some further information, then I suggest you get in touch with your school directly. And yeah, you can see there. Okay, so first off, we have Singapore. And I don't know if any of you watched the presentation that Nanyang Technological University gave this morning, but it was really insightful and gave us some really great tips about studying in Asia. I'm going to reference it a few times in this presentation just because it was so interesting. And I think it really highlights that the partner are really best placed to provide that kind of in-depth information. If you are interested in NTU, then we will have a recording of that presentation that we can provide, or we can provide the contact details for our contact at NTU. Okay, next up we have our partners in China with the eligible schools. I love the picture here of the student balancing on the Great Wall. I just think it's fantastic. One of our most popular destinations here would be Beijing Normal University. We've actually had quite a few students go there in the past, and we've got lots of student accounts of life at BNU and some handy tips. So if you are interested, let us know and we can provide these. Okay, so next up we have South Korea, Thailand and Taiwan. We actually didn't have many student pictures here, so if you see the one on the left by the windmill, that is actually me in Daejeon, which is where KAIST is located. So if any students here from the School of Computer Sciences are listening or interested in life in South Korea, then please do get in touch with me directly, and I'm happy to give you all of my personal tips and recommendations about life in Korea. We also have our partners in Thailand and Taiwan. You can see that these are quite specialist and they're actually new partners for Cardiff. So if you are from the School of Modern Languages or the School of Music and you're lucky enough to have this opportunity, then I really encourage you to consider them. I know I'm a little bit biased here, but these are probably my 3 top countries in the world. Okay, so next up we have Japan, and this is our biggest country in Asia in terms of partners. You can see that a lot of these partners are especially linked to the School of Modern Languages. So I just want to take this opportunity to mention that the School of Modern Languages have their own exchange team, as well as an excellent coordinator for Japan. So once you've finished this presentation and you have some questions, you can also get in touch with them, and they really have that expert advice. Finally, we've got our partners in Hong Kong. So this is our widest area in terms of eligible schools. We're also really lucky that hopefully today we have one of our ambassadors who studied at Hong Kong University who can answer some questions about that. I think Hong Kong is a fantastic choice for students because it's often described as a East meets West type of destination. So you can really experience some traditional culture, but there's also a massive international presence. We're not the only university in the world that's partnered with universities in Hong Kong, and it's an extremely popular destination for students around the world. So it's more than likely that you're going to meet some students from a whole array of countries and cultures during your time there. Okay, so before you start looking at hosts specifically, the first place you should look is the intranet page for your school. So I've shown the NCAP example here. You can check on your eligibility as well as see a list of partners for your school. These have been especially course mapped to make sure that they're suitable. I just want to take the opportunity as well to mention that you might be thinking of studying in Asia and you have a specific partner in mind, but you've noticed that this isn't on the list for your school. If this is the case, then please do get in touch with us. Unfortunately, I can't guarantee that we'll be able to assist because it's really dependent on quite a lot of factors. But I just wanted to let you know that we're happy to facilitate that. Okay, so why study in Asia? And in particular, a question you might be asking is, why would I choose a partner in Asia over one of our other amazing destinations? So first up, we have an up-and-coming international exchange region. So what I mean here is that traditionally international exchanges began with destinations in the US, Australia, New Zealand, and of course these are still great locations and amazing choices, but I think destinations in Asia are rising in popularity. And I think this is really testament to how much of a global society we've become and how interest in these countries is generally rising overall. I think if there's one reason that I could give you to go to Asia or to study in Asia would be you can do something slightly different to the norm. You can do something extraordinary. Next up, we've got different culture. So studying in Asia will really give you that chance to live and experience a culture entirely different to your own. So, of course, like I mentioned with Hong Kong, there are similarities there and an international feel to a lot of these destinations. So it's not always hugely different, but it's something to keep in mind. Okay, demonstrate skills. So as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, studying abroad really gives you the opportunity to demonstrate skills that you can use either in your future studies or in your future career. I think this is particularly true for destinations in Asia. Just to give you a kind of personal perspective here, I get a lot of questions in job interviews about how I managed in a different system or how I managed with the language barrier. And I don't think I necessarily would have had those questions if I'd studied or lived somewhere else. And I think that it can be really used as a conversation starter or give you that in to talk about these skills that you've gained. Okay, next we have exchange. Obviously, this is international exchange, but by this I mean that by studying in Asia, not only are you participating in an academic exchange, but also really a cultural exchange and a social exchange too. Okay, forefront of industry. So this means that for some of these destinations, you probably can study at the forefront of industry. So this could be business in Hong Kong, China, Japan, or Singapore, or computer science in South Korea. These destinations are really known for these subject areas, so it's a really great opportunity. And not to mention those of you who are studying a language as well. Travel, I know this is studying abroad, but travel is a big part of this, and you get some really great countries around that area. And language, so finally, you'll be able to study in English, but of course, a lot of our partners also offer the opportunity to study the host language too. Okay, so now we're on to academics abroad. So this is studying abroad, and academics should be a key part of your decision making. I put some of the general feedback that we've had from students. Now, this is a presentation about studying in Asia, which is a huge region, as I've mentioned. And of course, the academic culture is going to be different in different parts of Asia. So the experiences of a student studying in Japan or in China aren't going to be exactly the same. So what I've done here is I've taken a look at our surveys that we give to students, and I've collated some of the most common feedback that we've had. As number one, we have workload can be higher. So there can be more assignments or assessments throughout the year. Next up, we've got class participation and discussion. Often you'll be expected to participate in the class, and this can be part of your grade. Attendance. So attendance is important everywhere, but we've had feedback from students that classes are often mandatory and they mean it. Okay, formal atmosphere. Generally, it's more formal than, say, somewhere like the US, where it's quite casual. Okay, assignments and independent study. So in the UK, we actually put a lot of emphasis on independent study, and this can be true for our partners in Asia as well. So for an example, you might have some required reading or assignments you need to complete before the next class. And then we've got high standards and high expectations. So other feedback that we've had is that the standard of teaching is very high with our Asian partners, but with that, the universities often have high expectations. I'd like to add that, with high standards and high expectations, you can also have high reward. So you should really be thinking about what these high standards can do for you academically and how this can be seen as a positive thing. We've got some quotes here from students who studied abroad in some of our Asian partners. So I'm just going to give you a second to read these because they're really interesting, and I think it shows the differences. So, how do you find out more information about academics abroad, and how can you research the academic culture of the country that you're going to? I think this is a great just general quote here is be prepared for new challenges. You may need to learn in a new and different way. So we've got searching for module syllabi. Contact the partner directly if these are hard to find or if the website is difficult to navigate. Again, reading partner web pages and learning the expectations. Check languages. So English classes should be available, but if these aren't available directly on the website, you can contact the host. Speaking with students from the institution or who have attended the institution before. Finding general advice on blogs and YouTube videos. Also, we do have a blogging platform ourselves called Cardiff Globetrotters. So this is general advice that we actually give to all international exchange students. If you've been to other presentations this week, you would have seen this. But I think it's very relevant here, and it just shows how the information that you need is out there. And earlier when I talked about how an exchange can demonstrate key skills that you can use in the future, this is one of them. Organising your academics abroad is not a small task, especially if you're going somewhere with a very different culture to ours, but it's worth putting in the effort so you don't have to scramble to do this last minute or you're not shocked by the differences. Okay. So with academics, like I said, it's really important to do your research. Also look at the modules available just to see if they're in line with your academic interests. I've included this piece of advice here from a student who studied in the US just because I think it's such great advice, just like if you're going to uni in the UK, you're not going to enjoy it if you don't enjoy your studies. Also, we have some advice here. So speak to your school. Each school has an exchange coordinator who can help advise you on the academic side of studying abroad. Generally, you must be enrolled full-time. So that means studying the equivalent of 60 Cardiff credits per semester. Flexibility, oftentimes there is some flexibility there. So could you learn something entirely different that you would study at Cardiff, or can you learn your subject from an entirely different perspective? Also, look at, are you taking replacement credits or undertaking a year abroad? And finally, be proactive. So showing that you're looking at those module choices can really show that you're interested in studying abroad, and it is actually usually part of the application as well. Also, finally, just double check if there are any restrictions for exchange students. Sometimes there can be a list of specific modules that students aren't able to study or that they are able to study. So again, you can usually find this on the host website. Okay, so now on to how do I choose culture and location. So remember, you're not just going to be studying abroad, but you'll also be living abroad, and the local culture of where you live will have a huge impact on your experience. So just make sure you research the day-to-day life in that country, as well as any cultural attitudes or differences. In some countries, so for example, Japan, South Korea, China, the overall culture is going to be very different to what you're used to. A good idea here would be to look at the advice of not only of those studying in those countries, but people who are living there generally. I found some great vlogs on YouTube that can really go in depth and help you prepare. In general, though, it's a good idea to look at, what are the attitudes towards women, disability, sexuality, gender, ethnicity, or religion? What groups, if any, are discriminated against and why? Also, is this a cosmopolitan or international destination that you're going to? And if it's not, how could this affect you personally? Then we've got dietary requirements. So how might your specific dietary requirements be met both on and off campus? An example would be, say, if you're vegan, you're going to find it easier in some places than you would in others. Okay, laws. So as an example, what is the drinking age or laws around drinking? I mention this just because it is very important to stick to the laws of the country you're visiting, and we do go over this in more depth during our pre-departure sessions. So, but it's just good to be aware of. Another example would be how gum or e-cigarettes are banned in Singapore, and If you have these, you might be required to return home. I don't want to scare you, but it is important and it's part of your research. Okay, next up we've got transport. No, we don't. We've got location. So part of the location is transport. So how will you get around? Will you need to commute? Is it accessible? Climate as well. The climate is important. An example, so summers in parts of Asia can be very hot and humid. When I was there, that took some getting used to, but I quickly adapted. And then mental and emotional health support. So it's always worthwhile just double checking what services are available at the partner institution. And if this is something that is particularly important to you, then do get in touch and we can help you with this. It's also worth noting that Cardiff University offers comprehensive advice on equality and diversity on the intranet. So before you do make an application, you just want to research these topics. And again, do book an appointment and we can discuss these with you. I think, again, it just highlights how research is key. I have put some further advice. It's similar to the previous slide. So speak to past participants. We can help arrange this. Read blogs from students, as well as good old travel guides, and also the internet. Lots of people have studied abroad in Asia in the past, so there's loads of information out there. Okay, so after you look at specific countries, you might want to look at the campus environment a little more. This is something that I think students often overlook, but it makes a huge difference to your experience. You should be asking similar questions as you would if you're applying to a UK university all over again. Oh, it looks like I forgot to put the names on here, but at the top, we've got Hong Kong Polytechnic, we've got Nanyang Technological University here on the left, and we've got Waseda University in Japan on the right. So it just goes to show kind of the different environments that you'll be studying in. I just think they're quite cool pictures. But you can see the questions that you should be asking here on the left. One I'd just like to highlight, particularly with partners in Asia, would be how many international students are there, and are there any events for international students? So like I said, it can be a social exchange and you might want to meet friends from all over the world, and that's a good question to ask. Okay, so we've looked over where you can go and how you choose, but another big question you might have is how much will it cost? So I've outlined the 4 main costs here. Oh, there's 5 costs. I've outlined the 5 main costs here. But if you haven't decided on a university abroad, then a good tip that we have would be start off by researching the cost of living generally in that country before moving on to the specific costs. This way you start big and then go small. So costs in Asia can vary, obviously, with the different countries. So the cost of living in Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore can actually be higher than those in the UK. But then cost of living in China, Korea, or Taiwan or Thailand can be lower. So it's also very personal and it depends on everyone's style of living. So if you want a more objective view of the costs in those countries, I recommend a website called Numbeo. You can actually compare the cost of living in a specific city abroad with the cost of living in Cardiff. Also, just, financial planning can be quite overwhelming, especially when you're looking at going abroad. So this is a good time to book an appointment. We've got a lot of experience and we can help you find the information you need. Okay, so I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. The best place to start is the intranet. We have a page that is dedicated to costs to consider for an international exchange. So when building this page, we surveyed our partner universities and we asked them for specific costs that students may face. Do please check that out during your financial planning. Okay, we also have this great spreadsheet called the Global Opportunities Cost Calculator, which is a perfect description for what this is. I've mentioned this a few times, to be honest, and if you have an appointment with me, I'm probably going to mention it again because I just think it's great. It's fairly self-explanatory, but you put your expenses in on the left and your incoming funds on the right, and it will calculate the difference between the two. I just think it's a really great tool because once you put all the amounts in, you can save it and then you have a record of your expected expenses, especially if you're looking at converting between different currencies. It's good to have just the amount there. You can also find this on our funding page on the intranet. Okay, so going back to the main costs of exchange, one of the biggest costs that you'll probably face is accommodation. I put some examples here just to show how the costs can really vary between different partners, and you can see that it does vary quite a lot. Also, different partners in Asia will put things per year, per month, or per semester. Again, this shows how research is key. I put some pictures here also just to show some examples of dorm rooms. So we have Singapore on the top and Hong Kong below. I know that they look empty and a little bit cold, but of course you can decorate these, and NTU actually gave a really great example of decorated rooms in their presentation. I didn't want to steal their pictures, but just to highlight, obviously you would be living there. So some general questions that you might want to ask when you're looking at accommodation in the partner would be, is the accommodation on campus, and is this guaranteed to exchange students? Another question would be, if you're unable to find on-campus accommodation, then will the partner support you in finding off-campus housing? This is particularly important, obviously, if you don't speak the host language. It's important that that support is there. Generally they will, but again, it's good to check. Single or sharing. So sharing a room is quite common, and it can also be the most cost-effective choice. Some of our partners do have single rooms available, but just so you're aware, these might be a little bit more expensive. Okay, meal plan. So a meal plan is needed in some universities, and quite often you won't have access to a big kitchen like you would in the UK. Of course, this is different to what we're used to, but students in the past have said that they enjoyed having a meal plan because it was one less thing to worry about. Then we've got deposits. So would you need to pay a deposit, and extra costs? So during my research and in discussions with students, there can sometimes be extra costs involved in accommodation. So particularly for Asia, sometimes there can be a cost of having air conditioning or extra cost for your utilities. So this will be outlined to you when you apply, but it's just worth keeping in mind. Okay, sharing with. So would you be sharing with fellow international exchange students or with home students from that country? And it's worth thinking about how that will affect you. Nanyang Technological University mentioned earlier how they try to host fellow exchange students together, which is really great to know. Then I've put, how flexible can I be? So again, this is a question you should be asking yourself, because with these costs, flexibility is really key. Okay, so next up we have visa costs. I just want to say, first of all, we are not legally qualified visa advisors, so we're unable to give you specific advice about applying for your visa. In most instances, students taking part in an international exchange will need a visa, but of course this can vary. So give a general idea of the costs here from our cost to consider intranet page. We also link to the relevant embassy pages, so you can check out all of the eligibility criteria and required documentation. In most instances, for our partners in Asia, the host university themselves will support you in obtaining a visa, and quite often they are actually your visa sponsor. This can sometimes actually make the process a little easier. One common feedback we had from students who went to Hong Kong was that this process was quite simple and just required some documentation for them to fill out. I also wanted to point out for Japan specifically, as part of the visa process, you'll need something called a certificate of eligibility directly from your Japanese host. Some feedback here was that sometimes this can take a little while to process. And again, this just highlights that the need for organisation and starting these processes as soon as you're able to. A lot of our other partners have this document as well. It's sometimes called a certificate of acceptance. Another note here on evidence of funds. So you may need to provide evidence of the finances you have to support yourself abroad. Such evidence may include, detailed bank statements of you or your parents' accounts, or evidence of scholarships or funding, or a combination that meet these total expenses. Again, we have this on the cost to consider page, but just to give you an example, in Hong Kong and Japan, this can vary. Generally, you should have enough to cover flights and your estimated expenses. In South Korea, this is approximately about £9,500, but the amount is confirmed with your certificate of acceptance. So the best advice I can give here is to check the embassy website as well as the partner website. Also, I just want to mention that, once you begin to get into these specifics, so accommodation, visas, health insurance, you can always get in touch with the host. Quite often they do have qualified visa advisors. And as I mentioned before, in Asia, quite often the partner is your sponsor. So sometimes I know people can feel a little bit awkward or uncomfortable about this, but if you are, then do please send us an email and we can always forward this onto the host for you. Okay, so finally we have health insurance. So I don't need to tell you, health insurance is incredibly important. I've outlined the different approach that different partners take here. You can see it is very different between the different regions or different countries. So if you are finding this information hard to find, then you can always Google the university name, health insurance, international exchange. You can also get in touch with the host and we can support you in finding this information as well. And just for any students who are listening who might be applying at the moment, and actually just generally good advice, please remember to read the policies carefully and just know what you are and are not covered for. Okay, so we've covered the costs, and now we ask, is there any funding available? And this goes for all international exchanges as well, but just so you're aware. So just to again mention that you're not required to pay the partner university tuition fees, you'll just carry on paying Cardiff University as usual. Those going abroad for a full year also get a reduction in their fees and will only need to pay 15% to Cardiff. We also have the Global Opportunities Bursary. This is a non-means tested bursary that eligible students can receive to help towards the cost of their exchange. These are actually subject to annual review and they haven't been confirmed for next year, but students going abroad this year, they were able to receive a one-off bursary of £700 for a year and £500 for a semester. These are going to be confirmed at some point though, so we will let you know. Finally, we've got student finance. So you are entitled to receive the same amount of student loan or grant whilst abroad, and some students actually are eligible to receive an overseas rate. There's also something called the travel grant, which I'll talk about in a bit more detail in a moment. Finally, if you are thinking about going abroad and you have some specific questions about student finance, then we have a great advice and money team here. Oh, sorry. We have a great advice and money team here at Cardiff. I've just popped their email down there, so contact them and you can always discuss with them. Okay, so I mentioned the travel grant before, but as I mentioned, this is something provided by Student Finance, so it's external to our offices. The travel grant is a reimbursement grant, so eligible students can claim back some of the costs. You can see here I've put flights, medical insurance, visa costs. The amount that you can claim is dependent on your household income, and it does actually vary between Student Finance England and Student Finance Wales. So we've got a really great comprehensive fact sheet about this on the intranet, so please download that for more detail. But just wanted to bring this up because it's really great for covering some of those costs. Whew, okay, so I know I've covered quite a lot of information today, but just before I get into the application process, I just wanted to bring up some quotes for you. So we actually asked our students who would study abroad in Asia a question, and that question was, what would you say to students considering an international exchange? And we've put some of their answers here for you. I think it really highlights the way students feel after their exchange, so it's worth reading. I'll just give you a second. Particularly, I like the advice from Louise at BNU. Okay, Okay, I wanted to add here some specific advice about applications to some of our partners in Asia. I think this is particularly true for those in Japan, but it's also good advice for them all. So, oh, pardon me. The process can take a while, so it's really good to be prepared. Students also can be asked to um, show evidence of being able to support themselves financially, which I mentioned. They might also have to have ID photos taken. A lot of time there is also a medical check that's needed. This could involve x-rays, that's not uncommon. So we don't want you to be shocked or worried about this at this stage, but it's just really good to be aware of it, just so that you don't get further down the process and realise what's involved. Also, for those of you who are in the School of Modern Languages, just remember that you can book an appointment with them as well to discuss this. Okay, so you've taken a look at the partners, you've made your informed decisions, and now I can hear you asking me, how do I apply? I'm desperate to go on a study abroad. So first up, there's an overview of the internal application, just so you can have an idea of how things work. Please keep in mind that where you can go does depend on your degree program, and some schools might have a slightly different process. So please do check with your school beforehand, particularly those who are in the School of Modern Languages, or like I mentioned, biosciences or chemistry students who are taking part in research. There might be a slightly different process, so please do check with your school. But you'll usually begin the process of applying around a year or so before you're due to go abroad. A good example of this would be students who are due to go abroad next autumn and now in the process of applying. So with most students, you need to apply within your school first, as I mentioned. You then complete an application form. For most people and most processes, you'll be asked to detail your top 3 destinations. The great thing about this is you can actually choose a mixture of international exchange destinations or European destinations, and it's really great. We do try to give everyone their first choice, but obviously this isn't guaranteed, so it's good that you've got those backups available. Then your school will review their applications and will inform us of successful applicants. Okay, then we go on to the external process. So you'll be nominated to your host institution. You will apply directly to them. You'll apply for your visa if required. You'll then you'll then attend a pre-departure session. So this is typically held in March or April time for those going abroad in autumn, and November time for those going abroad in spring. So the message that I want you to take away from all of this really is that sometimes it can seem like there's quite a lot to do when studying abroad, but when it's broken up into these stages, it's really quite manageable. The key, like I said earlier, is to be organised and to stick to deadlines. Also remember that we're here to support you. Okay, so before we move on to our ambassador chats, I just wanted to remind you that you can get some really great information about our partners in Asia through the Discover Global Opportunities notebook. Just search Discover Global Opportunities Week on the intranet, and that should come up on the landing page. Okay, so do we have Svetla from the University of Hong Kong?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hello. Okay, so Svetla is one of our ambassadors. So Svetla, if you could please just introduce yourself and tell us all a little bit about where you went.
So hello everyone, I'm Svetla, and I went to Hong Kong in the HKU uni, and I'm a psychology student.
Okay, so how was your experience how was your experience studying abroad in Hong Kong, like generally? And do you have any tips for students who might be considering a placement at one of our partners?
Yeah, so Hong Kong was great. Like in general, it was great. Obviously, maybe not everyone knows, but Hong Kong was a bit rough this year. So it wasn't your usual, like, very calm and experience. But despite all of the difficulties, like I think we got the most of it. So in general, like I'm gonna be honest, it was difficult because although it's east meets west, there's still like a period of transition you need to get over. There's a lot of people, especially in the time you would go, it's very hot. It's very, very hot. And everything is very like it's massive, like all of the buildings, and you feel so small, and it's very overwhelming initially. So I think you need some time to get adapted to it. But once you do, then everything will be like good. So tips in regards to surviving in Hong Kong. Well, if the political situations continues being the way it is, then avoid the central parts or avoid the protests because it can get dangerous. But I'm sure that things will cool off by that time. But more practical tips, I would say that you should definitely get one of an online banking card because this is the way you're gonna withdraw money. Since in Hong Kong, yes, you can use your card, but it would be good if you could get some cash as well because a lot of places don't do cards. So I would definitely recommend getting some online banking app because your life is going to be 1,000 times easier. Another thing I would say is that in regards to accommodation, as Jenny mentioned, sometimes it can be more expensive, but at least what HKU did was they offered to fund some of our accommodation because we couldn't get into uni accommodation. So that was very helpful. So basically, with that funding, we could cover 1 month's rent, which was, say, approximately 350, if I'm remembering correctly. And yes, so I would absolutely say, on like a side note, definitely do try everything. Like, if you can go places, then do so. Like, don't be afraid. It's going to be scary initially, absolutely, but I think you should definitely go for it because in retrospect, you're going to be very happy you did.
Oh, I love that. I think that's such great advice, as well as like the practical advice. It's really great. Okay, so one more question. How did you feel about the academics at Hong Kong University? Did you feel like they were very different in Cardiff or quite similar?
Well, in general, I would say that Hong Kong have adapted to the standardized academic, like pretty much the standard. They've absolutely gone for it. But at the same time, I think because psychology, for example, in particular, because obviously I don't know for the other degrees, is more like assignment loaded, but in terms of like bigger assignments. But whereas Hong Kong is like the program itself is more like broken down into like smaller pieces. Say you would get like this small assignment, then that small assignment, and it would all add up. You obviously need to attend and things, which here is only applicable for seminars. But I think it makes you be more consistent. So it's like more structured, I would say, in a way. So yeah, you can fall behind, obviously, if you don't study, but I think it's a bit harder because they set the structure and you just have to walk through it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really interesting to know because I think that's a big barrier for students is they feel like the academics might be different. So that's really great advice. So
Yeah.
finally, just before we move on to Bethany, last question. I can see some of your pictures here. So just were you able to travel during your time in Hong Kong? And if you were, where was the best place that you went?
Oh, so I went to Macau, which the second picture is from. I went to Japan and to South Korea as well. So I wouldn't be able to make like a solid choice between, say, South Korea and Japan because I think they're quite different. And
Mhm.
obviously, we in Europe kind of tend to, like, yes, Asia, as if it's like one big thing, but it is, but it's not homogenous. It's very different. So I would definitely say, like, if you can go travel anywhere, obviously be careful because not everywhere is as safe as Hong Kong. But I cannot really choose a favorite, but maybe it would be either Japan or South Korea because it was a great experience.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much today for coming along. And I think that's very like great advice that, we're talking about Asia today, but there are very different cultures involved, because I've been in Korea and I've been in Japan, and I completely understand what you mean. They're very different places, but also some
Absolutely.
similarities. Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for giving us your insights. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Bethany. So Bethany actually took part in a internship in China. So it's slightly different experience, but I think it's really great to see that difference. So Bethany, are you there?
Hello, hi.
Hello. Hi. So I know you didn't take the kind of study abroad route, but I think it's really interesting to hear your thoughts. And so please could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you went?
Hi, so I'm Bethany. I'm a religious studies and politics student, and I went to Qingdao in China. So that's in the Shandong province, and it's on the coast. So there was lots of beaches. Yeah, it was really lovely.
Oh, that's amazing. That sounds really cool. I guess so in my mind, I don't always think about beaches in China, but of course there are. So,
Yeah.
okay, so how would you say your experience was generally? And in particular, did you face any difficulties, particularly around like language or different cultures?
So yeah, I was very nervous before I went, just because yeah, it's a very obviously it's a different language, different culture. But it was absolutely amazing. So everyone was really, really friendly. So although there was a language barrier, obviously we had lessons once a week where we were learning Mandarin, so I was picking up a little bit, but a lot of people spoke English, and it was quite easy to understand what people meant, like when we were going to eat and stuff like that. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I suppose I think you touched on this earlier, but I'm vegan, so sometimes the food was a bit difficult. But I just learnt the words for like vegan and the different vegan dishes, so I kind of got around that. And yeah, no, the experience as a whole was incredible. Like I said, everyone was very welcoming. I went out for lunch a lot with the people that I worked with. And again, like they took me to vegan places, which was really nice, like really thoughtful of all of them. So yeah, kind of any difficulties that I had, it wasn't too difficult to work around them.
Oh, I think that's such a good point that you make as well. I think that when you're living in these different cultures and places, often the people around you can be very supportive and understand that it's different for you. And I'm glad you touched on being vegan because it is something that people should consider. So, okay, another question, I guess, would you have any like practical tips for students who might be considering a placement in China, or anything that they need to be aware of in terms of the process?
I was going to say just for going to China, I think one thing that was really helpful for me with like settling my nerves was the Facebook groups where you can get in contact with people that are going to the same place as you. That made me feel so much better because I messaged a few of the girls before I went, like before I flew to Qingdao, and getting to know them a bit before made me feel so much better because I kind of knew some of the people there already. And that made me more relaxed. Part of the to do with the process, I'd say definitely have a checklist of all the things you need to take, and maybe again speak to, I don't know if you can be in contact. I had a manager who was there, so I could ask him of the list of things that I needed to take or some things that I shouldn't forget. So he gave me a list, which was really nice. I'm not sure with studying if you can get in contact with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, there would be the host. The host university would be the one. So yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's helpful.
I think that as well, just to, sorry to jump in, but when you mentioned the Facebook page, that's another really good advice for students out there, that we do have these resources where you can talk to other students who might be going or have been. I mean, I'm just so jealous. It sounds like you had like a great experience. Was you were working in a law firm, was that right?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That
well,
must have been.
oh, sorry. For the first half, I was working in a law firm, and then in the second half, I was working in the legal department of a I guess it was like a cartoon agency, but the cartoon that they were working on was half like with the UK, so it had some really big actors in it, and I knew most of them, so that was quite exciting because we met the director and he kind of gave us like behind the scene clips and stuff like that, so it was really amazing.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so just, I asked Svetla this same question, so I'm going to ask you, did you get a chance to travel anywhere else? Or if you didn't, was there anywhere particular that you would suggest people visit?
So there was lots of trips available, and I did the trip to Beijing, and we climbed the Great Wall of China and tobogganed down, which was amazing because that was definitely high up on my bucket list. And then we also climbed Taishan Mountain, which is the holiest mountain in China. It's absolutely massive, but it was such a great experience that when we were looking up at it, none of us thought we were going to make it to the top. I think that's the picture of us on the screen. But yeah, that was really amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I maybe not for me climbing up a mountain, but definitely visiting the Great Wall is also on my bucket list. And tobogganing down, how cool. Okay, so thank you so much, Bethany. That was really, and Svetla, that was really great insights into going abroad. Okay, so now just before we get to the questions, I just want to let you know where you can find out some more information. So obviously, we have our intranet pages, just search Spend Time Abroad. Also, if you're thinking about going through an international exchange, then please book an appointment with us. Also, again, I did mention the School of Modern Languages. You can get in touch with them directly. Also, you can follow us on social media through the Cardiff University Instagram account and the Cardiff University Students Facebook group, where we post about new opportunities and experiences of our past participants. We also have a newsletter that we send out once a month with information about upcoming deadlines and new opportunities. So you can do this by scanning the QR code in the corner. Okay, so on to, are there any questions? Let me just bring up the Q&A. Okay, so first question is from Anonymous, and it says, can I study in Hong Kong for one semester and Europe for another? I think this does depend on your school, but generally the answer is no. You kind of have to make a decision between international exchange and Erasmus. So, for example, if your school allows you to go abroad for a year, generally you do have to study abroad at one destination. I know there are some exemptions though, so for students who are in the School of Modern Languages, they might be able to study in Hong Kong or Europe for another. So do please check out with your school, but generally you do have to choose. Okay, so do students struggle to study in Asia compared with North America or Europe? I think generally, no, I don't think there's a huge struggle there, but like I said, there is some feedback that there are differences. So I think this a student who might struggle in Asia potentially could struggle as well in North America or Europe. So it is a different system and there are differences there. So I think if you do your research beforehand, it will be less of a struggle. And as well, speaking to students like Svetla, who studied abroad in Hong Kong, they have valuable experience and we can help coordinate that. Okay, next question. Is it difficult to get accepted into the programs? So as part of the application process, as I showed you, we do an internal application first before you make your application to the host. Part of the reason for this is to make sure that you meet the academic eligibility criteria that the hosts are looking for. So we are aware of the criteria that the hosts have. So generally, once you are past that stage, you're probably likely to be accepted into the host. I can't promise and I can't say that there isn't something in your application that means you aren't accepted, but generally we do that pre-vetting beforehand, just so you are most likely to be accepted by the host. Is anyone ever rejected if they can't evidence funds? Well, obviously this is a legal process. So I can't say for sure if people are rejected. Obviously, that there is a possibility that you could be if you aren't able to evidence those funds. In my personal experience, again, just not from a legal point of view, but from my experience, I've never seen any students who are rejected because of that. But it is worthwhile that sometimes students do consider a destination, but then find that they can't go because they know that they won't be able to evidence those funds. So it's just really having a look early, working out saving and working out how you can evidence those funds. So again, I've said it all along, but it's worth researching. Okay. And the final question we've got is, if your placement year is in year 3, when should you start applying for it? So if your placement year is all of year 3, so it's a year abroad, you want to start looking at exchanges in the autumn semester of year 2. So in general, a good rule of thumb is you want to start planning and looking at exchanges around about a year before you're due to go. That's kind of how long it takes and is a general rule of thumb. Obviously, do check with your school, because like internal process first, so they would be best placed. Oh, we got a new question. So what if I change my mind after becoming accepted? Can I then change to somewhere else? Oh, that's a really good question. We haven't had that so far this week. So generally, yes, it depends on the timing. So once you begin to make these choices, you will start making different commitments. So academic commitments, financial commitments. It might be a little bit difficult after that point to change your mind and apply somewhere else. But generally, you can, until those commitments, you could change your mind, but it's worth keeping in mind that partners have application deadlines. So once you're kind of at the point where you're applying to a partner university, generally you just have to be aware that there are deadlines around that time. So if you go quite far into the process and you change your mind, you might find that there are no other placements available because the deadlines have all passed. So I think this is really highlights why we ask people to choose different destinations, just so, you know, if you do change your mind, obviously that does happen and we can certainly facilitate that with the host, but just try to be sure that of those ones that you choose, they are places that you want to go to. Okay, I'm going to give it just another minute, just if any other questions come in. But while I'm waiting, Heledd reminded me in the announcements there. This is our first time running our Discover Global Opportunities Week virtually. So we've put together a survey and we would really love to get your feedback. So if you could spare just a couple of minutes to provide your thoughts, the link is in the the link is in the Q&A, so please do fill that out. We really appreciate your feedback and we can look about how we can do this again in the future. Oh, there is one new question. Let me just, two new questions. Okay. When should we book an appointment if you have a placement in year 3? So actually, I mean, that's a personal choice, but we have students who have multiple appointments. If you're in the beginning stages of planning, so you can book an appointment at the beginning of your year 2, so autumn semester of your year 2, we can then look at different choices. Then as you progress through year 2, ready for your year 3 placement, we can have more appointments to look at the actual application for the host that you've chosen. So yeah, definitely you can look at booking that initial appointment at the start of your year 2. If you're in your year 2 now, you can book an appointment now and we can discuss just those kind of general choices, and then we can have further appointments to discuss the specifics. And okay, where was the other question? Oh, what if I change my mind after arriving? What would happen? You know, that does happen. So we do have students who go abroad and then decide that they want to come home. Just a good reminder is that we are always going to be here to support you during your time abroad. So if you are having a hard time or have any questions whilst you're abroad, you can get in touch with us. But if you did want to come home, obviously you would need to have that conversation with your host university and we can also facilitate that. You can let us and your academic school know. But if you want to change to a different destination after arriving, I'm going to be completely honest, that's probably really, really unlikely. It does depend what degree program you're on, whether you have the opportunity to go abroad in the future. But once you're there, it's more than likely if you change your mind, that would be to come home and either continue your studies at Cardiff or, come home. But it's unlikely that we would be able to then say fly you to a different destination and a different partner, just because of those deadlines, as I mentioned. Okay, so I think, I don't think that there's going to be any more questions, but if you do have any questions, let us know and we can follow up via email. And thank you everyone who's out there listening, and please complete our survey. And thank you Bethany and Svetla for coming along today as well. Okay, thank you.